Hello all, welcome to the Red Hat session. Today we are going to talk about how to accelerate and secure your distributed data ecosystem with Red Hat OpenShift on top of Open Hybrid Cloud architecture. Today I have my good friend and colleague Andreas joining us, who is going to share the stage with me. Just to start with the introductions, I am Ahilan Ponnusamy. I am part of the APAC GTM specialist team. I focus on our open hybrid cloud architecture and the application and the data workloads that goes on top of it. Without making or wasting much time, Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Andreas Penn. I'm the Chief Architect for Australia and New Zealand, and my key focus areas are really cloud strategies and transformation. So to get started, OpenShift and Open Hybrid Multi-Cloud is sort of the context, and there's a lot of words in there, right? And I just want to go quickly through it. So OpenShift is our container and application platform across different clouds and different infrastructure footprints. You can run it on bare metal, you can run it on VMware, you can run it on System P, on System Z, you can run it on Aero as Aero service in Azure, you can run it as a ROSA managed service in AWS, you can run it in Alibaba Cloud. And that's really what we're all about. It's the choice to the business and our customers is what we think is important, and that's our key value prop. So what does it mean, open, hybrid, multi-cloud? So open means open standards, open source, open architecture. We think this is important for our customers to have this investment safety. Proprietary software always has the risk that you kind of locked into a specific way, and we believe there's a better way, and the open source way is the better way. Hybrid means you can run it, as I just said, on premises and in the cloud and public cloud with that. And multi-cloud means basically you can choose whatever cloud you want to run it in, whether it's Alibaba Cloud, whether it's IBM Cloud, whether it's AWS, Google, the choice is yours. And that's important because sometimes there are cloud or hyperscaler proprietary services you want to use. So just to set the scene a little bit, that's what we mean when we say open, hybrid, multi-cloud. Then big ideas drive business innovation. At the end of the day, right, the world is an exciting place at the moment. It's an incredible time. Businesses are moving faster than ever before. Today we can do things that we could only dream of a few years ago. So if you think of the movie Avatar, for example, the script for that movie was around for many, many years, but they didn't actually make that movie because the technology wasn't ready to do that movie. And that's sort of where we are at now, right? Things that looked like magic maybe 5 or 10 years ago are now simply possible. So technologies, open source communities, and new ways of collaboration are driving business innovation. No longer are we looking at startups and Web 2.0 companies like Facebook, Uber, Airbnb for inspiration as to what innovation looks like. We come up with it ourselves, right? Today, every organization, every geography in any industry can innovate, create more customer value and differentiation, and compete on an equal playing field. And with Red Hat OpenShift, we're building on our heritage of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, providing you with a secure, stable platform that enables your organization to innovate faster. Already years ago, right? It's not the big eating the small anymore. As I just said, like back then when the big iron was there and the compute was expensive, now it's the small eating the fast. And that's a very important mindset change, because no longer is your size a competitive advantage. Your agility and your flexibility and your innovation power is an important advantage. So the question is simply throwing back to you: do you need to deliver solutions faster? Will delivering solutions faster help your organization innovate and exceed goals? So that's what today's presentation is about, and I hope I can make that clear as to why OpenShift and why Red Hat's innovation power coming from the open source community is so vital for organization success. So what I'm going to walk you through is a bit of a build-up slide, and I just explained it before I go through. So at the bottom you see different operating model spans, and that just basically means different deployment scenarios. At the top you see on-premises, you see multi-processor architecture like System P, System Z, x86. Then you see single public cloud and secondary public cloud, which is often part of a cloud strategy in FSI, for example, where you need to have supplier contestability. So you have organizations saying hyperscaler A is our primary cloud and hyperscaler B is our secondary cloud. Then you have multi-public cloud organizations that say, okay, I don't really want to limit myself to only 2 hyperscalers or 1 hyperscalers. Anything goes. That's multi-public cloud. Then you have a hybrid multi-cloud, which is on-premises is designed as a cloud, and then they use also separate multi-clouds, and then hybrid multi-cloud hosted services. This is, as I said earlier, Arrow, like the Azure Red Hat OpenShift, or Rosa, the Red Hat OpenShift on Amazon Web Services, which are managed services, which means basically it takes the effort and the operational aspects of running a container or an application platform away from you, and you can basically just focus on the applications on top of that. And then there is edge and composable compute. And I think this is important in terms of a cloud strategy, because we know what's there at the moment. We're looking at the hyperscalers, but we also know that edge is something that comes pretty soon. And it's not a telco thing. Yes, there's the provider edge, but there's also the enterprise edge. There's the operational edge, and or the operations edge as such, right? There are IoT devices, and every customer experience will sooner or later be impacted or require an edge deployment. And that's important if you set your cloud strategy today, because if you go down the wrong path, it might actually make it unnecessarily harder to leverage the ecosystem and the technology that is out there. On the left-hand side, I've got a bit of a categorization from low to high, none, entry, and enterprise. This is really about experience of consistency and enterprise readiness as such. So I've got at the very bottom the XKS, the naked Kubernetes services. And the reason I'm focusing on Kubernetes and containers is because it's such a vital ingredient on any cloud strategy. Moving to the cloud is basically successful or non-successful by the way how you do it, right? And that means, how do I package my my applications up, my workloads up, and how do I orchestrate it across the cloud? Because running a 24/7 always on monolithic application in the cloud is probably too expensive, and we're talking to customers, so they're moving those workloads back on premises because it's just cheaper and better to run. But where the cloud is good for is if you have scale out and scale in workloads, right? So that's to keep in mind. So then on top of that, I've got the anti-ware services. It's a bit of a pun, because you know, those very vendors that told us 5 years ago that, you know, don't worry about on-premises, you know, on-premises is dead, public cloud, there's only going to be public cloud, are now actually bringing offerings out there that allow you to run containers in Kubernetes both on-premises and in the public cloud, right? So also those guys have now seen that hybrid cloud and hybrid multi-cloud is a thing, and it refers to offerings like EKS Anywhere or Anthos, for example. Then on top of that, we have other Kubernetes software offerings such as Tanzu or Rancher. They're out there. They're also strong contestants. And then we have OpenShift at the very top. And that's, for me, the most enterprise-ready offering in terms of Kubernetes and containers. And yes, I might be biased, so I welcome you to do research yourself, but I'm going to walk you through the thinking here. So if you look at multiprocessor architecture, only OpenShift at the moment supports system P and system set workloads. And, you know, for many larger organizations, that's important because they've got investments in those processor architectures. And OpenShift is basically a way to upgrade your hardware just by installing OpenShift, because it allows you suddenly to run modern workloads on your existing investments, right? So you get a higher ROI out of your already existing investments. Then you have a single public cloud, the primary cloud, and that's where the naked services like XKS, AKS, EKS are really strong. The anti-ware services are strong, and really everyone is strong in that space. But it changes dramatically if you look at a secondary public cloud. Then suddenly those naked services, AKS doesn't run in AWS anymore. So you now need to re-engineer, reskill your workload, and that's your workforce, right? You need to reskill your workforce, and that's going to be expensive and also risky. Then you have the anti-ware services. They're sort of work in that space, but they're also 5 years behind because of what I said earlier, right? That wasn't part of their strategy in the beginning. And then other software offerings like Rancher and Tanzu are obviously also out there and available, but because they're not that rich in terms of experience, and they're also not as cloud native and Kubernetes centric as OpenShift. That's why I rated them a bit lower. Then we have multi-public cloud. Similar thing, right? You just expand that from 2 hyperscalers to multiple hyperscalers. Then you have hybrid multi-cloud, so you have on-premises. That's also where OpenShift is very strong. But yet also the other software offerings are strong because you can still install them on x86 in your own data centers. Then we look at hosted services, right? Mature organizations might actually look at getting rid of the operational aspects and focus more of that innovation and that growth and that flexibility that we talked about earlier on creating new applications and new features and functions for the customers. And that's where the hybrid multi-cloud hosted services are really important and vital for those organizations. And that's where Arrow, like Azure, Red Hat OpenShift, and Rosa, Red Hat OpenShift on Amazon Web Services is really important. And then we have edge deployments. So we got specific investments for edge deployments in OpenShift. We have single node clusters, and we also have remote worker nodes. And that's really important. We've got projects like Hypershift already started. We've got KCP, Kubernetes control plane, and crossplane, which is all about having control planes for many different Kubernetes clusters. And it shows you that the open source community is also thinking that way. In terms of connectivity, you have Submariner, you've got Scupper, you've got Istio or Service Mesh, you've got Federated Service Mesh. So you can clearly see that the trend is already going towards enabling platforms and workloads on the edge, right? So how is that related to Yugabyte? Well, I tell you, it's all about the data. We know, right, that data is the fuel, and you want to have that computer as close to the data as it gets. So that's why you need an edge deployment and be able to maybe have AI ML workloads running at the edge to make decisions, because you don't have time to go all the way to the data center and back. Also, you know, for gaming, streaming, there's low latency workloads like self-driving cars. There's just heaps of future potential for workloads that haven't even been invented yet, right? We talked about operational edge. We've got the IoT sensors, manufacturing plants, safety equipment, surveillance. There's just, you know, I think going forward, it will actually be the network who is more important than the data center as such, right? Because we see a massive distribution of further workloads. So that's sort of a bit of an overview without going deep, right? We always been asked, so what's the difference between, you know, offering X and OpenShift? And, you know, there are so many features and functions, it's nearly impossible. So you need to categorize, and that's what I tried to say here, right? So really, to summarize this, at the top, you get innovation, flexibility, and growth, because you don't have to concern yourself with where you want to deploy this. You take OpenShift, you deploy it wherever you need. You have a new location next week that you didn't know about 2 weeks ago, not a problem. You take OpenShift and you deploy it there. The operational processes, the skills of your workforce, they're just reusable. And if you don't do that, then you look at the gray box, which is really technical debt, undifferentiated heavy lifting, which slows you down, which hinders growth, which makes you unflexible, because you need to fix all those engineering problems that Red Hat and the open source community has already fixed for you. But don't believe me, it's not my words. I just copied them from a gentleman like Adrian Cockcroft. Lessons learned from Netflix, and that's exactly what he said. Don't do your own undifferentiated heavy lifting. And that's exactly what Red Hat is about. We're doing that work for you as a platform company to enable your workloads wherever you need them. For example, like Dr. Alex Lank, he called, when he was on stage at the Boston Summit, at the Boston Red Hat Summit, he called his cars, the BMWs, the Beamers, how we call them here in Australia, fun little IoT devices, right? So that's how he referred to them. But for example, you know, BMW uses OpenShift. They have 12 million connected cars and 1 billion requests per week. That shows you in terms of enterprise readiness, right, or scalability. And they don't have to worry about where they're deploying. I forgot the number. It's out there. So I think they're running like 17 clusters globally that you know, cater for all the workloads. But it doesn't matter. This is just one example, and I love it because Dr. Lank basically called them fun IoT devices. But we've got thousands of customers across telco, government, retail, FSI, it doesn't matter what your use cases is. We most likely have already one of similar use cases in our customer reference library. Then innovation at speed, flexibility to adapt, new customer experiences and lines of business. That's what Open Hybrid Multi-Cloud can deliver, and that's what Open Hybrid Multi-Cloud can deliver with Red Hat OpenShift, because of the reasons I just showed you in the previous slide. So we built Red Hat OpenShift so that any organization could thrive in a world of hybrid possibilities. So what does it mean? So we make conscious choices to be a platform company, so that we allow you, through a strong partner ecosystem, put any workload on that platform that you need, whether it's an AI ML workload or whether it's an integration workload, whether it's business process automation, it doesn't matter. We've got a strong partner ecosystem that allows you to have certified workloads running on the OpenShift platform from core to edge. And then just to wrap it up a bit, I just want to show you different components, right? So we have at the very bottom, we have the Linux container host operating system. This is important because security and enterprise readiness really starts at the bottom layer, right? And that's why you need things like SE Linux, C groups, namespaces that make sure that no hacker can go into your Kubernetes cluster and basically have access to all the containers in there. There's also supply chain security, which is very important. Red Hat makes sure that only trusted libraries and secure patches are basically rolled out, but also that nothing comes in from a bogus source, which, like Docker Hub is full of container images, for example, that I wouldn't trust in, or you shouldn't trust either, to run in your organization, right? Then you have Kubernetes as the open source project. Then we've got Kubernetes cluster services, installation, over-the-air updates, networking, ingress, log forwarding, everything you need as an enterprise. And on top of that is what I said earlier. It's the workloads, like the data services, the application services, platform services, whether it's service mesh or serverless, whether it's your CI/CD tooling. We come with all that out of the box, but it's still flexible. Yes, it is opinionated, but it's also not opinionated, because we don't want you to change your tooling and your infrastructure that you have already in place. So if you have already, let's say, Splunk or Prometheus or Grafana installed in working in your organization, then you just connect that up and you're up and running. So I hope that makes a bit of sense. Reach out to us if you have any further questions. We're always very happy to support you and to help you better understand and see use cases in your organization. And we also got a field solutions engineering offering, which means basically, if you on the verge of getting started, but you're not quite sure about a use case, then come to us. We engineer it for you, and we'll get you started. Okay. And with that, I hand over to my good friend Ahilan. Ahilan, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much. So just like Andreas mentioned, there is kind of a tremendous shift in the way the technology is built, consumed, and then managed. Gone are those days where technology is kind of confined into one single data center. Now, open hybrid cloud or open hybrid multi-cloud ecosystem is the standard, the way the applications are deployed. So in order for us to support these applications, the data ecosystem is also evolving. So we're going to spend some time talking about how we see the data evolution is happening and how it can be combined together with the application and the platform aspect of open hybrid cloud architecture to create a seamless ecosystem that delivers better business value and better customer outcomes. Next slide, please. So data ecosystem is also evolving faster and becoming more and more Kubernetes native. So if you look at it across SQL, NoSQL, and messaging ecosystem, be it your traditional database vendors or modern database vendors or your messaging systems, they are all making sure that their applications or their database technologies are now be able to be deployed on top of a Kubernetes ecosystem to achieve two different things. One thing is it makes them a more open hybrid cloud ecosystem friendly, and also it gives them their customers more flexibility to deploy the database in wherever or whatever form they want. It could be their on-prem data center or all the way to the edge data centers or the edge devices, Now, standardizing on top of Kubernetes can make those deployments much more seamless and easy to manage. Next slide, please. So let's spend some time talking about how this kind of evaluation is kind of made really outside in. When I say outside in, it is kind of pushed by the customers to the vendors. So if you look at the way that traditional applications were developed and deployed, they were monolithic in nature. So if you will have one CRM application, one ERP application that serves a business function, and all the data that is related to that particular application will be put in a huge database behind the scene. We call that as relational databases. So by the nature of it, these applications are slow evolving and they have a very long shelf life. So the databases by nature had been always been a single node databases that are very heavy, that have high data gravity. So automatically the applications needs to be deployed together or in a very close proximity to address security concerns as well as performance considerations that the enterprise might have. Fast forward to now, where the cloud native has become a standard deployment architecture across open hybrid architecture or a multi-cloud ecosystem. Now, the traditional way of the database deployment and management on a single monolithic database aspect may not serve the purpose that enterprises have. So the modern ecosystem requires more lightweight, distributed, and horizontally scalable database ecosystem, and also supports different type of database workloads or data workloads, which is not only your SQL, it is your SQL, NoSQL, as well as streaming workloads. I think that is what is triggering the momentum towards a more distributed data fabric kind of deployment that we are seeing more and more prominent in the industry. Next slide, please. So this is where we see Yugabyte helping us in establishing or extending the open hybrid cloud architecture into the data plane as well. Because by the nature of it, the distributed cloud native architecture requires a cloud native distributed database as well. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, it also needs to support multiple different data workloads, be it SQL workload, NoSQL, as well as streaming. And also it should support different cloud landing zones, be it your on-premise data center or your public cloud ecosystem, your co-location providers or edge data centers. It is important for your data ecosystem to be able to support and be deployed and managed across this ecosystem. And also the data needs to be distributed across, because you cannot pin some data to only one particular landing zone or one particular cloud provider, because if for some reason, if that cloud provider or the region is not available, your applications may not be able to function in the normal way. So the way we see this evolving is the open hybrid architecture will tremendously benefit by having a distributed data plane or a distributed database ecosystem that is deployed on a hybrid or multi-cloud ecosystem. And all the benefits that I talked about, it supports multiple different data workloads. It is distributed by nature. It can scale horizontally. And then the automation of lifecycle capabilities, especially the day two capabilities, since it can be deployed on a consistent Kubernetes-based OpenShift ecosystem, all adds up to the benefit that this provides to the ecosystem. Next slide, please. Okay, so how OpenShift and Yugabyte can benefit our customers, right? So as I mentioned before, Red Hat OpenShift is the open hybrid cloud Kubernetes platform. That is actually the #1 Kubernetes platform by distribution in the industry. And as Andreas highlighted, we have a consistent deployment model across different vectors. That is the different landing zones, different application distributions, so on and so forth. Extending that capability to the distributed open source based cloud native database ecosystem that Yugabyte provides will actually help our customers and enterprises build the platform for the future. Because as you have seen in the last 10 years, the innovation has taken the center stage in the way enterprises are taking their new services or new offerings to their customers. And also the technology landscape is shifting tremendously from a single data center to single cloud provider to an open hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud ecosystem. Now, on top of it, add 5G, IoT, and the innovation happening in that space. The next 5 years are going to be even more disruptive, right? So having this ecosystem that is built on top of a consistent platform as a service offering on top of Kubernetes, that is a multi-cloud hybrid cloud ready, and then having a data plane on top of a distributed database management system like Yugabyte helps the enterprises set themselves for the future. Next slide, please. So why cloud native database on OpenShift, right? So just to highlight or summarize whatever we discussed in the last 3 slides, it helps organizations to improve density. So they can get more value out of their infrastructure investments they have. It provides with dynamic scaling. So all seasonal workloads that needs additional capacity or additional processing power can be automatically enabled or automatically provided. And it provides hybrid cloud support. So it helps organizations to avoid vendor lock as well as provide a consistent data plane across their hybrid cloud ecosystem. And it improves availability because by nature, Kubernetes takes care of the workload management or the pod management. So by default, out of the box, the availability of the database is significantly improved. And also it is highly efficient by the data automation capabilities that it provides. Next slide. Okay, so this is how we see this is all fitting together, right? So if you look at it on top of a hybrid cloud ecosystem, that is your physical data center to virtual to private cloud, public cloud edge, we will have a consistent platform as a service deployment on top of Red Hat OpenShift, which is basically the open hybrid architecture model that we spoke about. Then we will have the data plane deployed and managed on top of it by Red Hat OpenShift that supports all your microservices cloud native architecture. So the important aspect here is this is a consistent application and data plane that is built on top of Red Hat OpenShift across all your landing zones or all your cloud providers. So some of the benefits, as we mentioned, are it provides with improved efficiency, improved density, lifecycle management automation, out-of-the-box security, and also the faster innovation cycle that the customers are after. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is all we had for you for today. Just like Andreas mentioned before, so we are very happy to talk to you about how leveraging Red Hat OpenShift can help you to build a more consistent and standardized open hybrid cloud architecture and extend that architecture to include Yugabyte as the data plane can also significantly benefit enterprises to support all your future workloads as well as all your digital transformation and your cloud native initiatives that you are currently working on a more cloud neutral open hybrid cloud architecture. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.